History is not shaped only by what was written down. It is also shaped by what was never carried forward. Across the ancient world, cities rise and then empty, without explanation. Strongholds reach a final moment and are never used again. Graves are sealed and nothing follows. These are not legends and they are not unfinished stories. They are real places where continuity ended. Archaeology can uncover walls, weapons, and human remains, but sometimes what it reveals most clearly is the point where history stops. Tonight, we explore 7 ancient mysteries defined not by unanswered questions, but by moments when the record does not continue. This is RiddleMeThis Mysteries, where the past reaches its limits. Cities are expected to leave ruins behind them. Burned layers, broken walls, signs of violence. Ani offers none of that. It was fortified, wealthy, and strategically placed. It was taken, reused, and still standing, and yet it was abandoned. This was not the aftermath of destruction, but the result of something quieter. This city occupies a naturally defensible position in the Armenian highlands, where steep ravines form a barrier on 3 sides, and fortified walls seal the 4th. This geography made it both secure and visible, an ideal point for control, trade, and administration. Roads converged here from Byzantium, Persia, the Caucasus, and the interior of Anatolia, placing Ani directly along east-west commercial routes that connected empires. By the late 10th century CE, that position turned Ani into a capital. In 961 CE, it became the seat of the Bagratid Armenian kingdom. At its height in the 10th and early 11th centuries, Ani was not a frontier outpost or ceremonial center. It was a functioning political city, home to a royal court, administrative institutions, military infrastructure, and a population likely numbering in the tens of thousands. Contemporary descriptions and archaeological remains point to a dense urban core. Markets, workshops, water systems, and residential quarters tightly packed behind its walls. Ani's skyline was dominated by religious architecture. Later generations would call it the city of 1,001 churches, not as a literal count, but as a reflection of how thoroughly churches, chapels, and monasteries defined its urban identity. The Cathedral of Ani, completed in the early 11th century and designed by the architect Tradat, stood at the city's center, an engineered structure built with precision masonry and structural confidence, comparable to the greatest buildings of the medieval world. For a time, Ani worked. Its systems aligned. Its roads led somewhere. The first break in continuity did not come with fire or siege. It came with administration. In 1045 CE, the Byzantine Empire annexed Ani. The city was not destroyed, but its role changed. The Armenian royal court was removed, and Ani lost its status as a capital. Political authority shifted elsewhere. Administrative networks thinned. The city remained inhabited, but it no longer directed the region around it. This mattered more than conquest. When Seljuk forces captured Ani in 1064 CE, the city did not abruptly end. Archaeological evidence shows continued occupation afterward. Churches were reused or adapted. Trade persisted at a reduced scale. Life went on, but without restoration of Ani's former importance. Ani did not end when it was taken. It ended when it no longer had a reason to continue. Over the following centuries, the pressures accumulated. Trade routes shifted away as new centers rose elsewhere. Control of the region changed hands repeatedly, fracturing long-term investment. The population declined unevenly, neighborhood by neighborhood, without a clear moment of abandonment. In 1319 CE, a major earthquake struck the region, severely damaging structures across the city. Yet earthquakes alone do not explain Ani's fate. Other medieval cities rebuilt after comparable disasters. Ani did not. By then, the population, resources, and political will required to recover were gone. There was no rebuilding phase, no renewal cycle, no replacement city. By the early modern period, Ani was largely deserted. Its streets were not paved over. Its walls were not dismantled for stone. Life did not return in another form. Use simply stopped. Today, Ani appears frozen. Unlike many ancient cities, it shows little later overbuilding. Streets remain readable. Churches stand without later additions layered on top. The city feels unfinished, not because it was destroyed, but because it was never repurposed. Ani reveals how a city can lose its future without losing its walls. And while Ani emptied slowly, other places would reach their endings far more abruptly. Dunluce was never attacked. It was never breached. It was never taken by force. It was defensible, occupied, and actively maintained. And yet, it was left behind. The castle stands on a narrow basalt outcrop along the northern coast of Ireland, where sheer cliffs drop directly into the Atlantic. Access was possible only by a narrow bridge, easily controlled and easily defended. On three sides, the sea itself formed a natural barrier. From a military standpoint, Dunluce was formidable. That same setting made it vulnerable in a different way. The Atlantic battered the rock relentlessly. Wind, salt spray, and erosion worked continuously at the foundations. The ground beneath the castle was strong enough to defend, but never stable enough to trust. The earliest fortifications on the site likely date to the late medieval period, around the 15th century. Initially held by the MacKillan family, Dunluce was positioned to control nearby sea routes and coastal territory. It was not isolated, it was strategic. In the mid-16th century, the castle passed into the hands of the MacDonald clan, who expanded it significantly. Under their control, Dunluce became more than a stronghold. It was transformed into a noble residence, administrative centre, and symbol of authority in Ulster. By the early 17th century, under Randall MacDonald, the first Earl of Antrim, the castle functioned as the seat of a powerful lord operating within both Irish and English political systems. This was a working place. Inside the walls were halls, kitchens, living quarters, storerooms, and defensive towers. Archaeological evidence shows that Dunluce was not merely occupied in name. It was lived in, organized, and maintained. Beyond the castle itself, a planned settlement developed nearby around 1608. Excavations have revealed cobbled streets, domestic structures, and formal gardens, evidence of a small community tied directly to the castle's presence. Life here was not symbolic. It was practical, daily, and exposed. At some point in the mid-17th century, a dramatic event entered local memory. According to later accounts, part of the castle's kitchen collapsed into the sea during a storm, carrying people and infrastructure with it. Whether every detail of this story is accurate is difficult to determine. What matters is that structural failure became undeniable. The castle did not fall in battle. It failed beneath its own weight. Dunluce was not abandoned because it could not be defended. It was abandoned because it could no longer be trusted. From that point on, confidence in the site eroded alongside the rock. Maintenance became increasingly difficult. The cost of repair rose. Living conditions remained harsh. At the same time, the strategic importance of the location declined. Political priorities shifted. The MacDonalds relocated inland to places where authority could be exercised without the constant threat of collapse beneath their feet. There was no final siege, no burning, no ceremonial ending. By the late 17th century, Dunluce ceased to function as a residence or centre of power. It was not rebuilt. It was not adapted for new use. It was not replaced. Its role simply ended. Today, Dunluce remains sharply defined against the sea. Walls still trace their original outlines. Towers still stand at the cliff's edge. Beneath the surface, the remains of the surrounding town lie preserved, frozen at the moment when life withdrew. Erosion continues, slowly reshaping the site long after people chose to leave. Dunluce shows how a place can be abandoned, not because it was conquered, but because staying became an unacceptable risk. At Dunluce, retreat was forced by the ground itself. Elsewhere, people would remain even when leaving might have saved them. Masada is remembered as a place of certainty, a final stand, a definitive ending. But that certainty rests on fragile ground. The site itself is unmistakably real. Masada rises as an isolated plateau above the western shore of the Dead Sea, its steep cliffs forming natural defenses on every side. Long before it became a symbol, it was a fortified place. In the late 1st century BCE, Herod the Great transformed the plateau into a refuge designed to withstand siege. Palaces were built along the cliff edges, walls enclosed the summit. An extensive system of cisterns was carved into the rock, capable of storing vast quantities of water in an arid landscape. This was a fortress built to endure isolation. Storerooms were stocked with food. Channels captured rare rainfall and directed it into reservoirs. Everything about Masada's design points to preparation and survival, not desperation. It was meant to outlast attackers, not to stage a final moment. During the First Jewish-Roman War, That preparation was tested. Around 73 or 74 CE, Roman forces of the 10th Legion laid siege to the plateau. The physical evidence of their campaign remains visible today. A stone circumvallation wall still encircles Masada, sealing it off from the surrounding desert. 8 Roman camps are clearly identifiable below. On the western side, a massive earthen ramp rises toward the summit, an enduring record of Roman military engineering. The siege happened, the Romans prevailed. What followed is where certainty begins to dissolve. The famous account of Masada's final moments comes from a single source, the historian Josephus. Writing years later and not present at the site, he described a dramatic sequence in which the defenders chose mass suicide rather than capture. His narrative includes speeches, orderly selection of victims, and a final act framed as a moral conclusion. No other contemporary account describes these events. Archaeology complicates the picture. Excavations at Masada uncovered human remains, but not in numbers that clearly correspond to Josephus's account. A small group of skeletons was found in a cave. Ostraka-bearing names were discovered and later interpreted by some as lots, though their purpose remains debated. There is no mass burial, no unambiguous physical confirmation of a coordinated act involving hundreds of people. The ground neither confirms nor denies the story. At Masada, the evidence does not confirm the ending. It reveals how much of it depends on belief. What archaeology does show is that Masada's function ended. After the Roman victory, the fortress ceased to operate as a place of refuge or power. There was no significant rebuilding, no sustained resettlement that restored life to the plateau. Whatever occurred in the final hours, continuity did not resume. In the decades that followed, Masada remained empty. What endured instead was interpretation. Archaeological work introduced uncertainty, but public memory preferred resolution. Over time, a single version of the ending hardened into accepted truth. The distinction between what could be proven and what was believed gradually blurred. Masada became known less for its physical remains than for the story told about them. Masada's use ended in the 1st century. Its meaning did not. Here, the record ends unevenly. The material remains are real, mapped, and extensively studied, yet they stop short of a complete account. Archaeology confirms presence, construction, and destruction. It does not confirm motive, sequence, or final decision. The site fell silent, while its interpretation grew louder. Masada shows what happens when evidence stops short of certainty, a contrast to places where history ends not in ambiguity, but in destruction so complete that no story can take its place. Vijayanagara should not have disappeared. Its ruins stretch across tens of square kilometers. Granite temples still stand. Processional avenues remain legible. Stone platforms, market streets, and ceremonial spaces survive in place. The material presence is overwhelming, and yet the city itself ceased to function almost at once. This was not a fragile settlement. It was one of the largest urban centers of the medieval world. Founded in 1336 CE, Vijayanagara became the capital of a powerful South Indian empire that controlled vast territory across the Deccan. By the 15th and early 16th centuries, it was a political, religious, and economic hub on a continental scale. Contemporary visitors described a dense city filled with markets, workshops, temples, and administrative quarters. Its population likely reached into the hundreds of thousands, supported by an extensive agricultural hinterland and one of the most sophisticated irrigation systems in the region. Vijayanagara was engineered for permanence. Granite temples anchored ritual life. Fortifications layered natural boulder fields with walls and gates. Water was managed through canals, tanks, and dams that regulated seasonal flows and sustained cultivation. Roads connected neighborhoods, markets, and sacred spaces in a planned urban fabric. Everything about the city's design assumed continuity, not just survival, but long-term use. That assumption ended in 1565 CE. At the Battle of Talikota, the empire's army was defeated by a coalition of Deccan sultanates. The loss was decisive. The ruler was killed or captured, and the military structure that had protected the capital collapsed in a single moment. The battle did not destroy Vijayanagara. It opened it. What followed was not an immediate erasure, but a prolonged dismantling. Historical accounts and archaeological evidence indicate that the city was subjected to systematic sacking over the months that followed. Temples were damaged or defaced. Palaces and administrative buildings were looted and broken apart. Statues were toppled. Infrastructure that supported governance and ritual life was deliberately rendered unusable. This was not random destruction driven by opportunity alone. It was a process aimed at neutralizing the city's ability to function as a capital. The damage varied across the urban landscape. Some structures remained standing, others were heavily targeted. But the result was consistent. The systems that sustained urban life were broken. Vijayanagara did not end when it lost a battle. It ended when recovery was made impossible. With the collapse of central authority came the end of royal patronage. Temples lost the support that maintained ritual cycles and upkeep. Administrative networks dissolved. Artisans, priests, and merchants dispersed to other centers where protection and resources still existed. Although remnants of the empire survived elsewhere, the capital itself was not rebuilt. The population left quickly. There was no gradual thinning, no slow abandonment measured over generations. Houses stood empty, streets fell silent. Later, visitors described a city of ruins inhabited only by animals and vegetation. Sacred sites continued to exist in isolation, but the city as a living organism did not return. Here the ending is structural. The city did not fade gradually or slip into uncertainty. Its systems were broken at once. Political authority, economic coordination, and ritual continuity collapsed together. Violence did not simply mark the end of occupation. It dismantled the conditions required for the city to function again. What remains today is a paradox. The material city survives in stone. Its layout can still be traced. Its monuments still dominate the landscape. And yet the life that once animated them ended decisively, leaving no successor layered on top. Here history did not fall silent, it was cut off. Vijayanagara stands as a reminder that some places do not end by being forgotten, but by being broken so thoroughly that nothing follows. But not every ending is fixed in place. Some occur in motion and leave no chance for return. Ships are designed for continuation. They leave, they arrive, and they return. At Salme, that sequence breaks. The site lies on the island of Salme, off the western coast of present-day Estonia. There are no chronicles that describe what happened here. No sagas, no local memory carried forward in place names or tradition. The event entered the historical record only in the early 21st century, when construction work exposed the outline of a wooden vessel buried beneath the ground. Excavations soon revealed a second ship nearby. Neither vessel was ceremonial in origin. Both were functional, clinker-built ships, constructed for travel and use. They were pulled onto land only after movement had already ended. Radiocarbon dating places the burials in the late 7th to early 8th century CE, decades before the period usually associated with large-scale Scandinavian expansion across the Baltic. This was not a time of established routes or repeated contact. Whatever brought these ships here occurred before continuity had formed. Inside the two vessels were the remains of at least 41 individuals. They were adult men, physically robust, with skeletal evidence showing repeated exposure to violence. Many bore sharp force injuries to the skull, ribs, and limbs, consistent with close combat. These were not ritual deaths or symbolic sacrifices. They were the physical outcome of confrontation. The bodies were not arranged for display or long preparation. They were placed where space allowed, layered within the hulls, some stacked above others. This was not a burial planned in advance. It was a response shaped by urgency and limitation. Weapons accompanied the dead: swords, spears, shields, along with knives and whetstones. Some weapons were deliberately damaged, a practice known from Scandinavian burial contexts, marking the transition from use to ritual closure. Gaming pieces were also present, objects tied to status and identity rather than warfare alone. Animals, including dogs and birds, were placed among the remains, reinforcing that burial customs were observed even under constrained conditions. Ritual did not erase circumstance, it acknowledged it. Isotopic and osteological analysis shows that these men were not local to Saaremaa. Their diets and skeletal markers point toward Scandinavia, likely central Sweden. Some of the individuals were biologically related, indicating a group that had traveled together for years, rather than a collection assembled at random. This was a mobile force, organized, equipped, and accustomed to movement. Why they were here remains unresolved. The material record allows several possibilities: an armed expedition, an early probing venture, or a diplomatic journey accompanied by warriors. What the evidence does not support is settlement. There are no signs of long-term occupation, no structures built to stay, and no material layers suggesting repeated return. At Salme, continuity ended before it could begin. Movement stopped and nothing followed. There is no evidence that the ships were repaired or launched again. The dead were not carried home. The site was not reused as a burial ground, nor did a community form around it. Whatever knowledge of the event existed among those involved did not persist in place or tradition. The ground closed over the ships and the moment remained isolated. For more than 1,000 years, Salme existed without meaning or memory. It was not reoccupied, reinterpreted, or transformed. Only excavation gave it a voice, revealing not a place that failed, but an episode that never continued. Here, history did not collapse or withdraw. It stopped at the edge of arrival. Elsewhere, endings would be shaped differently, not by interruption but by deliberate preservation. Kings are buried to be remembered. This one was buried correctly, and forgotten anyway. In 2014, archaeologists working in the royal necropolis of Abydos uncovered a modest tomb cut into the desert edge. The structure was compact, sealed, and quiet. Inside, the evidence was unambiguous. Painted on the walls were protective goddesses, Nut, Isis, Nephthys, Selket, positioned to guard the burial chamber according to long-established royal convention. A canopic shrine bore inscriptions naming the occupant. Titles were present, royal formulae were intact. The burial followed the rules. The name recorded was Woseribre Senebkay. Chronologically, the tomb belongs to the Second Intermediate Period, around the mid-17th century BCE, a time when Egypt was politically fragmented. Power was divided between competing courts, and authority was local rather than centralized. Yet even in this fractured landscape, kingship still demanded ritual precision. Senebkay received it. The tomb was intentionally sealed. Its chambers were laid out to control movement. The burial space was defined, enclosed, and closed off from reuse. Unlike many Egyptian tombs, this one was not adapted for later occupants. Its function was singular, to hold a ruler and keep him there. What makes the burial unusual is not what was done, but what was missing afterward. Senebkay does not appear in the canonical king lists. He is absent from later historical records. No temples were raised to him. No cult sustained his name. The tomb preserves a king that history refused to carry forward. Material details deepen that contradiction. Parts of the burial were constructed using reused stone blocks, including limestone and granite taken from earlier monuments in the Abydos area. Some blocks had been trimmed down, others still carried traces of prior inscriptions. This was not symbolic reuse, it was practical. The choice reflects the conditions of the time. During the Second Intermediate Period, access to fresh quarrying, long-distance transport, and centralized labor was limited. Royal authority still existed, but the infrastructure that once sustained monumental building no longer functioned at full scale. Kings ruled, but with reduced reach. Even so, the tomb was completed. The burial was performed, the seal held. At some point in antiquity, the tomb was entered by robbers. The mummy was disturbed. Burial goods were damaged or removed. This was not unusual in Egypt, where few tombs escaped intrusion entirely. Yet even this violation did not erase the structure itself. The tomb endured physically, even as its owner disappeared historically. The burial did not fail, the memory did. Archaeology can confirm his existence. It can reconstruct the tomb's layout. It can read his name where it was placed deliberately. What it cannot explain is why the chain stopped here. There is no evidence that Senebkay was deliberately erased. No defacement, no systematic removal of his name. His dynasty, sometimes referred to as the Abydos dynasty, existed alongside more powerful regimes. When those regimes reasserted control, smaller royal lines were not absorbed into memory. They were simply bypassed. History moved on without revision. The tomb remained sealed, not because it was protected by power, but because it was left outside the current of events. Its preservation was not the result of reverence. It was the result of irrelevance. Here, silence was not an accident. It was the outcome of a system that remembered selectively. This ending was not caused by destruction. It was not the result of abandonment or decay. It was the result of preservation without recognition. What survived here was not memory but material, and material alone would prove insufficient. In another place, evidence would multiply and certainty would collapse. Bodies do not accumulate at extreme altitude by chance. This many bodies do not die in the same place without reason. High in the Himalayas, at an elevation of roughly 5,000 meters above sea level, a small glacial lake sits surrounded by steep rock and seasonal snow. For much of the year, it is sealed beneath ice. When the melt comes, bones emerge, skulls, ribs, long limbs, scattered along the shoreline and visible beneath the shallow water. This is Roopkund Lake. There are no buildings nearby, no roads, no permanent settlement. The terrain is hostile, the air thin, the weather unpredictable. Survival here requires preparation and intent. Yet hundreds of human remains lie exposed, concentrated in a place where no community ever lived. But this lake is not a cemetery. Archaeological surveys have documented skeletal remains belonging to men, women, and children. The bones are not arranged. There are no burial markers, no structures, no signs of ritual interment. The remains appear where bodies fell and were later preserved by cold and ice. When snow recedes, the evidence returns. Initial explanations sought simplicity. A single disaster, a sudden storm, a pilgrimage gone wrong. Local legends spoke of divine punishment. For a time, these stories filled the gap left by uncertainty. Closer study eliminated the simple explanation. Osteological analysis identified trauma on many skulls, rounded fractures consistent with blunt force impacts. The injuries are concentrated on the head and shoulders. Defensive wounds are rare. There are no weapon marks that would suggest battle. Trauma is present, but it does not point cleanly to violence or accident alone. More importantly, the bones do not belong to one moment. Radiocarbon dating revealed that the dead at Roopkund did not arrive together. One major group dates to roughly the 8th to 10th centuries CE. Another group dates many centuries later, likely between the 18th and 19th centuries. These were not contemporaries. They did not share a single fate. Genetic analysis revealed that the dead did not belong to a single group. DNA extracted from the remains shows at least two distinct ancestry groups. One group has South Asian ancestry consistent with the region. Another group shows genetic profiles associated with the Eastern Mediterranean, including areas such as Greece or Crete. A third isolated individual shows Southeast Asian-related ancestry. They were not related. They did not come from the same place. They did not die at the same time. And yet they all ended up here. The evidence does not narrow the story. It supports multiple incompatible explanations. Why did groups separated by geography and centuries follow paths that brought them to the same remote lake? Why did people with no apparent connection arrive at the same altitude, in the same harsh environment, and fail to leave again? Why is there no material trace of camps, shrines, or repeated infrastructure that would explain return? Archaeology can answer parts of the question. It can tell us when some of these people lived. It can identify where they likely came from. It can describe the injuries they sustained and the conditions they faced. It cannot tell us why Roopkund mattered. There is no inscription to read, no record to consult, no tradition that survived to explain repeated arrival. The lake preserves bodies but withholds narrative. Each layer of analysis reveals clarity in isolation and contradiction in total. Here the problem is not absence of evidence. It is abundance without convergence. Roopkund shows the limit of reconstruction. It demonstrates that even when material survives, when science advances, when dates and origins are known, meaning can still remain unreachable. Evidence can endure intact and still refuse to explain itself. These 7 mysteries show that the ancient world did not disappear in a single way. What archaeology recovers is not the full past. It is what survived. At a certain point, the record stops. If one of them stayed with you, let it travel. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't. The search continues, here on RiddleMeThis Mysteries.